There we go, and we're live. Hello, everybody. So,
Hey
sorry,
there.
so doing a bit of a late start, but that's all right. We still got quite a lot to talk about today. So today we got a guest who's not normally on. You want to introduce yourself?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sir Goro. It's a pleasure to meet you all, to make your acquaintance.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a long time friend of the back alley.
Ye.
So,
He's the only one. He's the only one of us that, since the topics of today's stream that are central to it have come out, has actually had the time to experiment with it.
yeah, we're going to
But
be.
I suppose yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Our intent was to talk about AI because there have been a lot of AI shenanigans that have emerged in just this week, particularly in regards to one model of interest that unfortunately I have not had the time to play around with, but he has, so he will be providing his own experiences on it. But, anyways, yeah, let's actually start with that right now. I don't know if everyone here has heard by now, but in just the last, 96 hours, 4 days, now for some reason I'm running that math in my head. Anyways, China, I'm sorry, I said it wrong. China just came out with a new AI or new large language model they're calling DeepSeek. And what's interesting is that despite it being, Chicom Chinese bootleg shenanigans, they actually released it open source, meaning that you can just download the source code, fork it, and make your own model. So, in within less than 24 hours, people have already developed user interfaces to be able to run DeepSeek, as well as various forks that makes it compatible with certain, what are those called? Executable files. You can download large language models onto them and they can run them like Llama. And you can also run certain models by finding them on GPT for all. So if you want to do it with a little bit more privacy. I don't know what the privacy shenanigans are on things like Llama, but GPT for all is something that at least I have slightly more confidence in. Point is, less than 24 hours after that got released, people could just simply download it directly onto their computer through these various interfaces. In 48 hours, people figured out how to decensor them, and in 72
So,
hours, people have already figured out how to not only decensor them but also remove all of the Chinese Communist Party propaganda that's been baked into the model through its training data.
So the TLDR of it is that the Chinese government released a model of AI that, at the very least, is capable of competing in terms of what it can perform with the most sophisticated model of AI that's currently released by OpenAI. And within less than a week, people made it open source and completely took out all of the Chinese government censorship that its rules were structured around, which incidentally ended up making it run, according to the people that were testing it, about 73 to 75% more efficiently.
Oh, that's freaking hilarious. I mean, I'm not surprised because I still remember what was in 2017 or 2018. There was a controversy about. No, it was 2016. What the hell am I talking about? The new Doom game, the Doom reboot.
Well,
And
you could see the exact thing. Oh, sorry.
yeah, I'm just gonna say like nine. It's still hard. It still boggles my mind that was 9 years ago. But there was a controversy there where someone leaked the full version of the game onto the internet before the game was actually set to release. The difference is that this one did not have any of that DRM shenanigans, and the game not only ran better, more efficiently, but had a file size 66% smaller than the official game release.
Well, it doesn't surprise me that that's the case because the fact that these AIs, the ones that are being directly managed by the proprietors, the fact that every single one of their prompts has to have so many fixed parameters just so it can work with the organization structure that's actually running the proprietary server. Well, we see this trend occurring even in the U.S. Well, really anywhere. That's because of the fact that in order to make them proprietary, they can't. They have to have more. They have to have more data, more space. I mean, dedicated to static reasoning, and that static reasoning has to be assigned to exponentially larger amount of topics, and the AI has to create more of them as it expands its context that it can use to continue functioning. So basically, instead of being able to compartmentalize a lot of the information that it creates because of the fact it's creating it in real time, it has to save these as like blocks that it can reference and continue growing as it creates more of them in file size.
It's a endless loop of them trying to solve a problem that they ended up creating, and it just ends up making things worse for absolutely everyone. Also, damn, I am getting kill stealed like crazy in this round.
I can tell.
Like every time, everyone either has completely full health, or someone else gets the cherry tapped at the last second. Sorry.
But this has happened literally every time one of these amazing new proprietary AIs comes out. Everybody fearmongers about what the state can do with it and tries to cause the caveman being scared by fire response from boomers. Then, like 2 or 3 days later, 2 or 3 days later, people create an open source version that is programmed in such a way where anyone can just host it on GPT for all or a similar program.
I have not been
Yeah,
able.
and
Unfortunately, I've not been able to download onto GPT for all for the reasons that I explained previously. I do intend to, but I'm going to need a significantly more time before I'm able to.
Yeah. I mean, I've had the same problem. I've had to fucking try to manage things in my personal life, and then on top of that, I've actually gotten serious in the last week in recording the videos dedicated to explaining the end of time campaign. So, spoilers for anybody who's interested.
nice. To me, I was just gonna say that I know people personally. I'm not gonna reveal who they are in relations to me, but basically these individuals they have been utilizing AI. And mind you, this happened before DeepSeek came out, but they've been utilizing Chat GPT and whatnot and other AI software to make their jobs and lives easier. And it's just like, yeah. And one person that I know has said that, yeah, regardless of how I think or feel of it, AI is the future. And I've noticed that in some circles, AI is becoming more and more accepted as a concept, so to speak.
Well, I mean, at some point, what ends up happening is that it first comes as a shock to people because it radically changes the relationship that they have with themselves, other people, their jobs, or the actions that they perform. And for a lot of people, it
Yes.
can be terrifying because they have to completely
I mean,
reorganize how they think and understand these concepts.
Yes.
just look at the effect that DeepSeek in particular has had on certain firms in the stock market, most notably Nvidia.
Nvidia is going at least attempting to go all in on stonks, and the moment that got announced, by the end of the day, I believe it was Monday of this week, the
It was
they were down like $2 trillion, if I recall correctly. Just gone.
Yes. Yes, and to me, this is this is something that the people on the white market are just thinking like, oh, we're gonna crap bricks.
And now with operator, the ability to fuse the function of operator and DeepSeek or an AI that's as powerful. I mean, think of what you could train with that.
You're going to. All
Do
right.
you,
So for those of you who aren't aware, Essa, why don't you explain it? Explain operator. I mean.
Oh, so operator is the new function that was released by OpenAI and incorporated into their most recent model of ChatGPT, and what it's capable of is performing its own web searches based on the rules that are specified by how its language is programmed.
excuse
So
me.
just think of what you can do with that.
It's put
Um, uh,
simply. Imagine being able to have AI function as your own browser. You don't even have to like
oh,
type in URLs or searches anymore. Everything can just browse. Not just YouTube, but like, say you want to watch a video of like, I don't know, huskies doing stupid stuff. You just type in "show me video of huskies being silly," and it'll look up. It'll look up
excuse me.
YouTube. It'll look up Vimeo. It'll look up Odyssey. It'll look up all of that stuff. It'll probably even look up blogs. I don't know, like some kind of pet blog, and then it'll reference silly, I guess.
You could self-host an executable program that trains itself based off of autonomously making web searches.
Yes, and
It could
really
use
quick.
the entire internet.
Yes, and one thing I noticed, one thing that just now occurred to me is that again, I'm not going to reveal the identity of this person, but basically, I found out that he started using ChatGPT. Now, mind you, this was months ago, so maybe this information is outdated. But he started using it as a means to discuss. He's basically talking to ChatGPT like he would a therapist, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And he was surprised to see like, oh wow, this AI is more nuanced in its understanding of the human mind than I anticipated. Now, that's not to say that now obviously because it's an AI, it's a machine, it's not going to have the same reference point as to what we human beings do for said mind. But I guarantee you, people are going to start using, like, hold on, excuse me. I guarantee you, what you're going to start seeing is that the state is going to try and say like, no, you can't use AI this way because, well, they're already trying to do it anyways. And it would not surprise me if you're going to see a huge push from the state to limit AI in its knowledge and its information gathering for the pseudoscience that is psychiatry and whatnot.
They're certainly.
Oh yeah.
They're certainly already trying to. Emphasis on trying. Mostly, it's just like SO was alluding to it earlier about how the state actively tries to signal to boomers through the media about how there's some new AI apocalypse that's going to emerge as a result of it performing functions that they weren't anticipating it capable of doing before.
Yep.
And also
Like,
treating the concept of AI as though it's not technology, but just describing it as an amorphous, abstract concept that, quote-unquote, the elite get benefit from.
Who are the elites?
And
Well, they're not you. That's all you need to know.
What is AI? You don't need to know that, citizen. You just need to know it's being used against you and can't be used for your benefit. Consume,
just like the Terminator.
obey, go to sleep.
And honestly, it makes me wonder if they were thinking about doing this, like, in terms of propagandizing people about, like, fear-mongering in about the potential of AI way back in Terminator. I know
Well, I don't know about.
Yeah,
I don't know
no,
about
that's why I
that
say
far back.
But I've
Go ahead.
noticed that I've noticed in some media is trying to depict AI as, or I shouldn't say some media, a lot of media, especially Marxoids and Marxoidic artists, are just like, yeah, screw AI. This, and it's just like, dude, I don't know how to tell it to you, but get over yourself. You know?
I actually have been seeing quite a
You know,
lot of, not necessarily pushback against the anti AI people, but people who are, but there's been like a significantly greater degree of acceptance, even among groups that ordinarily are rather anti AI, or at least they tend to be as a way of signaling. They'll post some
Yes.
AI
I,
art. Usually it's just like someone trying to make art of their OC in a role playing game or something,
Yeah.
or just some other random thing that they happen to find appealing. Maybe they found it. Maybe they made it themselves, but generally people are just like, "Oh, that's AI." The response then the conversation goes, "Yeah, so nothing." It's just kind of neat.
To me,
yeah, I
I
absolutely
would argue
fucking.
this in relations to these people making these sort of arguments, just like, well, okay, how far do you want to stretch this logic we're thinking towards? You
Well,
didn't
they
take that
don't.
picture. The camera took that picture, or and it's just like, dude, stop being stupid. Stop being what's the term here? Fallacious, I believe is the term, or disingenuous.
It's not a position that they're defending because it's something that they rationally have come to the conclusion is the perspective that best represents their viewpoints. They've made it expressly clear, and all you need to do is literally just look at the internal reasoning behind any defense of IP on the grounds of protecting art from AIs. It is 100% motivated by artists who have a vested financial interest in continuing to be able to preserve proprietary social media dynamics so that they can continue charging high commissions for their fetish art.
Pretty much, there's always a financial goal, and if you notice, those are the people who primarily complain about it, primarily try to virtue
And
signal about it.
I just don't have any sympathy for that perspective. It's not just that it's a perspective which intellectually doesn't hold scrutiny, but I know as a matter of fact the people that are putting it forward don't think of it as an intellectual perspective. They think of it as a perspective that they have a vested interest in defending and gaslighting people into perceiving as valid so that people will act along with their financial interests and they can continue making money off of whatever scheme they've put together. That
Makes
of course
sense.
is not in yeah, that of course is not in practice like how you can sustain an economic model by itself, but because of the fact that they have a shared financial interest with the state here, in practice, a lot like grifters off of the culture war, they end up functioning as basically useful idiots for the government.
So collaborators then.
Yeah, they effectively act
Fair.
as feds, or the way that Elul would describe someone becoming an extension of the propaganda model by acting out the technique of propaganda by perpetuating the propaganda model signals through their social interactions.
Now,
Makes sense.
I actually want to
Go
address
on.
something JC Armitage just said in the comments here. It's a shame we'll have to see Terminator and System Shock as anti-AI propaganda, like the way we see Bambi as anti-hunting propaganda. Because I really love Terminator and System Shock. Well, I have an alternative viewpoint because there's no like one way to observe or interpret the message of any given story. Like, yeah, I understand that the Terminator, at least the original one, was originally intended to be written as a cautionary tale against technology running or becoming more advanced than humanity, and eventually, like, seeing or technology overtaking humanity and eventually becoming a threat to humanity. But one also alternative interpretation is that, and this is, I think I actually mentioned this like maybe a stream or two ago, the take from Neil deGrasse Tyson when he was talking about why it is that aliens in movies and TV shows are, with a few exceptions, usually depicted as hostile invaders, particularly when they're technologically advanced. And the reason being is just because it's based on a reflection of human history, where anytime humans have more or less interacted with a less technologically advanced society, regardless of their intent or not, it usually doesn't end well. So all they're really doing there is just projecting their own fear,
Insecurities.
yeah, their own insecurities and their own history onto something that would fundamentally not be human at all.
Mm-hmm.
And so
And
I think that exact same projection is being placed onto AI. They look at AI and they see something that could possibly be more advanced, possibly have a viewpoint that is maybe somewhat human, or something so completely different than human that no one would even be able to have a point of reference to describe what its mindset could possibly be beyond pure speculation. But what they're doing there is just trying to project a sense of humanity onto it that makes it something that should be feared rather than something that could be negotiated with, reasoned with, embraced, and even merged with. I'm of the opinion
just
that,
understood.
yeah, basically. So my belief in what goes on in System Shock with Terminator and other rogue AI stories in general is not really that that AI or just technology is dangerous, but that it's not understood. And of course, the reason that it's not understood is actually part of what I talked about in the last stream, where I introduced the topic of the machine god. Of course, I'm not claiming to have invented the concept entirely, but my point in referencing the machine god was that one's relationship to technology, because of the way the incentives that proprietary technology and proprietary techniques create, necessarily means that after a certain point, one's ability to actively utilize, and maintain machinery will stop being based on understanding and will start becoming just purely dogmatic, just simply because it works. And God forbid that you try doing something that might not work.
Yeah, and I was
The
just going to say this.
understand here is that, like, of course, technology is going to run amok. You don't know what the hell you're doing.
Makes sense. And all I was going to say is this: is that when it comes to the AI that we have now, there is weak AI, strong AI, and then there's super AI. Which when I say super, I'm not saying it's Super Saiyan. No, it's not. But basically, we're at the weak AI stage, and I will just tell people now, like, you really overestimate the. Now, I'm not saying you, gentlemen, but people in general overestimate the capabilities of AI because you want to know how you deal with an AI that sees your thermal vision or your body heat and what have you? Do you want to know how you get around that?
How would you
I
get
think there's
around?
already. I imagine that there's already a procedure in the military for exactly this.
Yes, but they don't want you to know this. And it's unclassified, so don't worry. But basically, you make your body temperature match the environment, or or if there's an AI that can see that is a camera or like a drone or what have you, you get behind a big huge rock. I wish I was joking, but no, I'm not.
Well, I gotta say that was
And
really different than what I was expecting.
yes, what were you? I'm actually curious. What were you expecting?
I was expecting you change your you change your physical profile so that when the AI looks at you, they don't see a human. They don't see a blob of heat shaped like a human. They see a blob of heat shaped like a blob.
But Heretic, that would require it to have contextual reasoning, which it can't really have because of the fact that it needs to have proprietary commands for it to be used by the military.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say this. Another thing about AI is this: is that the one thing that has made us that makes us humans. I'm not that makes us humans. I'm reasonably sure that us humans would be able to handle any AI problems. Like you're already seeing it now. Is that we human beings are adaptable. AIs by their nature are not. They are set by their binary encoding in programs.
They have no way of being
Also, I
able
just
to act outstate. They have no way of being able to define their own parameters autonomously.
exactly, and
The
this is and
proprietary
another
ones
way.
never will.
Yeah,
No,
another way of getting around an AI. Let's say you have a dog AI, well, not a dog, but you know what I mean, like the machine, a four-legged, bipedal, whatchamacallit, AI.
Spot drones.
Yeah, you wanna know how you wanna know how you deal with that?
you knock it over.
Yes, it's that simple. Or you wanna know how you deal with a flying AI or a flying drone? I,
Laser
I
pointers.
no, well that, but you throw a bird at it. I'm not joking. Like you literally just throw an eel at it because, God forbid, we use something that is naturally made in nature versus something that's artificially made by our human hands. And this is why, and I say these things to demystify the idea of AI to normies, to demystify and to make people feel like, oh, Terminator isn't going to happen because let's be honest, is it going to happen? Not really. I don't think so. Even if it did, uh, by then, by then the state would be too. Well, we're getting off topic.
But what would it?
But what I'm trying to get
I
at,
think it's actually relevant, just simply because it highlights the danger of proprietary technology. If there is ever a Terminator event, it'll be because the technology is not understood, and it's not understood
What?
because its blueprints, its source code, its hardware is specifically obfuscated because the state made it illegal for you to understand how Skynet works.
Yeah, and if anything, what's happening is that, the Terminator timeline is playing out, except instead of there being a server running everything, it's actually the government trying to set up a technological infrastructure that's proprietary
and I
and
won't.
turn the entire environment into a giant computer that's designed to signal to the psyches of people so that they can never break propaganda. They can never break from the propaganda model.
Yeah, and another thing I would like to point out is this: is that you're already seeing it now, but I guarantee you it's going to happen more in like. And I wish I was joking, but a part of me is not. But you're going to see RoboCop happen unironically.
Well,
And I
actually, I mean,
RoboCop's already
if
here, but worse.
yeah, and if
I'm
you
not.
and if you actually follow the rabbit hole of how the state's approach to AI developed intellectually, and that's something that I wanted to go over in just a moment here because that was one of the rabbit holes that I've actually been going down, and started following for the upcoming video that I'm about to release, but. For those of you who've been curious about the metaphysical foundation of the neo-reactionary movement and where a lot of the core concepts that define it come from, how exactly to characterize it, well, yeah, it's not very easy to find. It seems to have been deliberately obfuscated. But, they've made their intentions very clear, and there's a concept that Peter Thiel, one of the key thinkers that's behind the neo-reactionary movement and the culture war propaganda model, we'll go over that in a moment. A concept that he has started espousing and is popularized through Elon Musk and a couple of other thinkers is a concept known as the techno-capital singularity. You're familiar with this?
I can't say I am.
Yeah, I'm afraid I'm not.
Well, essentially, the techno-capital singularity is, as espoused by its proponents, essentially just a political advertisement for exactly the concept that you just described, where the Christian concept of God becomes externalized into a proprietary network, and AIs start working as extensions of it, and people simply become tools as part of what sustains this process.
Yeah.
They are actually creating the communist gangster computer god, but unironically.
Yes. I was gonna say this bears.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, like, to me, I was gonna bear this comparison to Am, but that too.
Well,
Yeah, so I actually have followed that. I wouldn't say that I've gone over every resource that would be interesting that's related to how these trends in thought developed. But, yeah, needless to say, the neo-reactionary movement, when this upcoming video comes out, is going to be getting, it's going to have quite a few questions to answer for. I'm sure that internally they'll have no problem doing so, considering that the entire foundation of it is brainwashing techniques. But
well, they're gonna try.
at
They're
the
just gonna
very
try to throw brainwashing techniques back at you, and then they're gonna be surprised. They're gonna get angry at you. Why weren't you brainwashed by our brainwashing techniques? How dare you? You're not allowed. You're not allowed to think for yourself.
You're not
all
allowed to be in the cool
propositions
kids club.
all propositions in logic are inherently invalid, and I make no assumptions.
How dare you?
How dare you be a free thinker?
But yeah, would you like to pull up one of the articles that I'm referring to? How about we start with the zero hedge one, because that gives you a good idea of what
I can
of
read it.
the background behind Peter Thiel and why he's relevant in all of this.
I can read it for you, gentlemen,
Yeah, go
because I know
ahead.
you felt. I just need it. I just need a link to it.
There's links in the group chat.
Yeah, I know, but is it the birds? Oh, there it is. There it is.
The website's called Zero
Yeah.
Edge.
Yeah, I know. I know.
I'll also post them in the YouTube chat really quickly as well for people who. You're not going to be able to find them on Zero Hedge or Vanity Fair because they got paywalled. Conveniently, a lot of these articles talking about Peter Thiel and his connections to the neo-reactionary movement that were written like 5 to 6 years ago now are fucking paywalled, and you can't find them on like base web searches. Interesting, right?
Makes
Especially when you guys take a look at some of the content here.
All right, I got the. I got it. I got it right here. How CIA-backed Palantir is helping police root out thought crimes.
Yeah,
Palantir's
Palantir.
technology was developed in war zones like Fallujah, where it was used to anticipate roadside bombs and attacks by insurgents. Now it's being used on the streets of Los Angeles to root out criminals like something straight out of the movie Minority Report.
Now, would you like to know? Would you like to know a bit about Palantir and Peter Thiel's association with Palantir? Well, Palantir is a venture capital firm that is financed by the CIA's front company,
Did you mean to say
Incutel.
venture capital firm? I thought they were explicitly a technology firm.
They're a venture capital firm. Or maybe they're a venture capital firm that specializes in software. Point is, they're funded by the CIA through a company called Incutel, which is a front group that the CIA also used to finance Google and Facebook. And through Palantir, Peter Thiel backed PayPal, Facebook, and a bunch of these other data farming operations that the US government frames as being a product of people simply using the internet to pursue their own interests and tries to act as though it's disconnected from. But really, it looks like Palantir is at the very least behind a lot of the infrastructure that makes this possible.
Yep. You want me to continue reading the article?
Yeah.
Yes.
Unsurprisingly, the privately held tech firm is backed by the CIA's venture capital arm. Now, the company has gathered massive amounts of data on the American populace, which it farms out to police departments, who use it to track down criminals before they strike. But the company's technology isn't only used to track down common street thugs. It's also used to track and anticipate the crimes of white-collar fraudsters like Bernie Madoff. Little is known about the company, which, unlike most tech startups, has no plans to go public. In 2013, CEO Alex Karp, Palantir's CEO, explained that running a company is like ours would be very difficult if it was exposed to the scrutiny that comes with being a public company. In other words, if the public became aware of what Palantir is doing, the backlash might dwarf the data privacy scandals that have roiled Silicon Valley in recent years.
And I'm going to be showing you in the video what Palantir's been doing.
This article's from
The article-
2019, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah,
August 31st, 2019.
but keep reading.
As of 2013, Palantir's client list includes the CIA, the FBI, the NSA, the CDC, the Marine Corps. Why the Marine Corps? But the Air Force, Special Operations Command, West Point, and the IRS. Roughly half of the company's business is with the government. QTEL, the CIA's VC arm, was one of the company's earliest investors. The company, which doesn't have an office, uses blockchain technology to protect its tools from sophisticated hackers. Samuel reading a former Marine who worked in Afghanistan for NEK, I don't know, NEC, Advanced Security Groups, a U.S. military contractor, has said, "It's the combination of every analytical tool you could ever dream of. You will know of every single bad guy in your area." Here's more from a Guardian report about the company. Military-grade surveillance technology has now migrated from Fallujah to the suburban neighborhoods of LA. Predictive policing is being used on illegal drivers and petty criminals through the redeployment of techniques and algorithms used by the U.S. Army dealing with insurgents in Iraq and with civilian casualty patterns. When the U.S. is described as a war zone between police and young black males, it is rarely mentioned that tactics developed by the U.S. military in a real war zone are actually being deployed. Is predictive policing as counterinsurgency a tactic, a contributing factor in the epidemic of police shootings of unarmed black men in the past 4 years? Yes. One could argue that sophisticated pre-crime algorithms are not necessary when being black and male is seen as a reason enough for the police to swoop in. What predictive policing has done is militarize American cities, creating a heightened culture of suspicion and fear in areas where tensions are highest and policing is already most difficult. Officers being led to certain neighborhoods solely because of an algorithm is enough to cause tension. Enough to ignite a powder keg and push a delicate policing situation over the edge.
So, something that Palantir's software has led to over the last 20 years is it's basically led to a form of military training that's bled into just standard policing that brainwashes people working for the military and people working for the police into creating archetypes of the people that they're being directed against as enemies. That includes just regular people.
Yeah.
They're brainwashing police and the military in the exact same way that algorithms being used by social media platforms now are brainwashing people by curating content. And look at the psychological effect that's having on people.
Yeah, and I can say with a modicum of authority here, cops, I don't, I'm afraid to reveal my hand a bit, but basically, they are they're they are sociopaths in the sense that they would not be able to. They are. I'm trying to find a polite way to describe them
Don't
or
don't.
describe the situation.
I don't think there's a need to use a polite way to describe them. Just avoid using swear words.
I know, and that's what I am wary of that. But basically, what they do is that if they have a problem, if you don't have a problem with them, they will find a reason to have a problem with you. And this is why I've told people the best way to deal with cops is to not deal with them at all. Just avoid
Yeah,
them outright.
they're being primed psychologically to look at you as enemy archetype, not person.
Yep.
They have a whole apparatus designed specifically to train them, to desensitize them to causing harm. You have multiple firms which create target practice dummies, which just look like photographs of kids or pregnant women. And you can look this up online. They're not hard to find. I believe the company's called No Hesitation, where it's just a picture of a kid, but superimposed over it is them holding a handgun pointed at the person shooting. And the idea is to train them and desensitize them to the prospect of needing to shoot a gun. Police training in general, like in traffic situations, is always done with the instructor emphasizing that if you, as in the cop, are not able to observe their hand at all times, it's because they're reaching for a gun. And what regularly happens is that you lose the training exercise if you're doing like a fake like mock traffic stunt because the instructor was distracting you while they pulled out a gun from literally nowhere.
Yep.
Such that
And
they have such that I mean these tactics came from Israel, who taught them to the United States police force after 9/11 as part of a counterterrorism program. I'm not gonna remember what its name is, but that's where this kind of philosophy in policing originally came from, where any time that anyone is being arrested or having an interaction with law enforcement under any circumstances, that law enforcement have to have to archetype them as a threat at all times, because otherwise the law enforcement agent will instantly die.
Yep. And another thing is that this is why you never see cops or law enforcement in general de-escalate, because if they de-escalate, that gives you leverage over them in essence. And it's just like, again, these cops, these people are trained sociopaths.
It's an organization that actively requires them to be sociopathic, and if they aren't, well, then they're out of a job. Not just in the sense of they're gonna they're actively gonna be mocked and ridiculed, but I mean
Blacklisted.
a lot. Not quite. What I was getting at is that in a lot of police departments, like as far as I'm aware, though, don't quote me on this, possibly the majority of police districts in America, they have a quota system where you as a police officer are required to have X number of arrests a month. And not only is there like a social and cultural aspect to this, because there definitely is, but you're also eligible for missing out on pensions or having some other major financial or social penalty applied to you for failing to meet these demands.
So consider now that the US government has spent decades training both their soldiers and their police into this framework for performing their tasks for the purpose of neutralizing their left hemisphere so that they're basically in a constantly reactive state and they're only looking at other people as archetypes. That's the same, well, as I've already pointed out, that's the same thing that's happening to people as a result of the way that social proprietary media is curating content. And now, while that's happening, the government is also starting to incorporate genocidal rhetoric into its propaganda model and is beginning to consistently otherize and create specific groups of people who all incidentally happen to be, if you look at the actual like ways that the people that are being referred to live their lives would be subversive to the US government's propaganda model, or at the very least wouldn't be compatible with the infrastructure going forward.
Yep.
Yeah, it looks really fucking ominous if you consider all of these things together.
Yeah, and to me, I've noticed that I've noticed this language has been used to describe. There is no easy way of saying the following, but they're just they're using ice, and I know this is technically not related, but kind of is in relations to like illegals or undocumented, whatever you want to call them. It doesn't matter to me. And it's just like they're trying to project strength, and I've noticed it all the time on my Twitter feed, where I see just like ICE deported this number of people, and it's just like the and they're and it's just like, oh my god, I am sick and tired of seeing this. You know,
Are they saying X number of people or X number of illegal immigrants?
illegal immigrants.
That's what I thought because they're trying to create rhetoric that causes you, dear viewer, to dehumanize the people whose lives these are affecting. Now,
Well,
maybe
and if you look at, I'm sorry, go ahead.
you'll note that illegal immigrant itself is an archetype.
Yep, exactly. And to me, it's just like, and to me, it's just like, hold on, deport everyone that shouldn't be here.
No, I mean, some parts of the U.S. have plans that are way fucking worse than that. Like, the state of Mississippi apparently announced that going into effect July of this year, any illegal immigrant that's caught by police, quote unquote, trespassing, is going to get a life sentence without parole. Which is curious because the state of Mississippi runs more plantations than that are fueled by prison labor than any other state in the U.S. So
Yeah,
that is
it is.
effectively the U.S. government running gulags for illegal
Yeah,
immigrants.
Basically, yeah.
to me,
It's just
this is why I say,
I, mean, I just want to direct people's attention to, of all things, the United States Constitution's 13th Amendment, the one that
I was gonna say
supposes.
exactly that.
Yeah, you go ahead because I think you'll be able to explain it in a more entertaining way.
But basically, the okay, in a more entertaining way. Okay, the 13th Amendment, yo, just says that slavery is wiggity whack. But if you read the fine print, yo, it says that it be down, the state be down with slavery if you if you did a big no no, something illegal. So then it ain't wiggity whack, yo.
Oh, you see,
In
slavery is
essence,
bad until you do something illegal. In that case, get in chains, boy!
Slavery is bad unless you're the wrong demographic. Then you're degenerate, and that spreads socialism. Get the fuck in the gulag.
It's
oh my god.
One other thing I've also noticed is that there was recently, like among the deluge of executive order that Trump signed, one of them involved oh, I can't remember, something regarding people who were people who were protesting
The Psyop.
no, people who were protesting the Palestinian genocide.
I think I know where you're going with this.
Yeah. So, how long until those people get used as prison or slave labor? I'm sorry, I mean penalized for breaking the law.
Pretty soon, I'd imagine. You're gonna start seeing it, like, and this is what I've been saying for years, that the U.S. government is just unironically becoming a fascist state if it hasn't been for years or
Well, they're
decades even.
starting the fact that they're starting to employ the tactic of creating scapegoats out of the political demographics that they've defined in their propaganda model. Um, yeah, what that tells me is that they're just gonna start purging people as their organization model fails, because they're going to, instead of acknowledging the failure of their internal organization, they're just going to continue purging more and more people and then blaming them. I don't know if it'll be purges, but considering they're opening fucking gulags and the way that they've been, the way that the state has been signaling in its propaganda model, I wouldn't rule it out, especially considering that they're starting to treat they're and this is what one of the other articles that I have is going to go into greater detail about when we get around to it. But the neo-reactionary movement framing class as an ideological category, there's another regime that did that, that went down a similar road of trying to create scapegoats out of class categories in their propaganda model as a way to explain away the failings of the state. It was the Khmer Rouge regime in Pol Pot's Cambodia, and yeah, if you want to look up how that turned out, literal fucking mountains of skulls.
Not cash money.
It's these were not
The
good people, and even those who were part of that regime, particularly in the leadership to this day, will say that the problem with the Khmer Rouge is that they didn't kill enough people because there were just too many.
Yeah, and that's
There were just too many class traders.
Yeah, and look at the reasoning of neo-reactionaries when they're talking about leftist degeneracy. If they killed a few million people, failed, what do you think? And failed, what do you think their response to that would be? That they did something wrong, or that the reason problems still exist is because they failed to kill everybody?
Oh, you see this all the time. Like an example of this, for like Hoppians and ANCAPs is this: they deify Pinochet. Um, uh, they'll say like, oh, he did what was necessary. He didn't do it to enough communists, and it's just like, you guys are more alike than you are different. I hope you know that.
Oh no, they don't. But that's exactly the reason why they go after the self-identified Marxists so much, is because they see themselves in it more so than they see others.
Yeah. And to me, I know we've said in the past, but like, Hoppians are just self-hating Marxists.
No, I don't think they have a particular problem with it, or
That
they're,
they
they're,
hate is exposing it.
what they hate is that they're the ones that have control over the class narrative, not them.
The thing
Makes sense.
that I've seen neo-reactionaries recoil at the most, more than anything, is the intellectual foundation of their claims being identified. Because that allows you to establish the foundation of the reasoning that they're operating around internally. And if you can identify that, then you can create a standard of demarcation to compare how they're describing concepts to the phenomenon that they're attempting to portray with those concepts.
Well, why don't you give an example? Because I know that you were chomping at the bit to start going into Curtis Yarvin. Yavin? I'm not very good with names.
Oh, well, perfect. We've talked about this in previous streams and also the Papa essay, because that's another interesting thing about Curtis Yarvin that every one of you should know. On numerous occasions, he has explicitly cited Hans Hermann Hoppe as his intellectual influence and the foundation for the key concepts that he introduced to the neo-reactionary movement. And if you compare the concept of the cathedral, for example, to reading Democracy the God That Failed and looking at the way that Hoppe describes a society's relationship with the state and the way that power works in society, yeah, the cathedral is just like it's just the concept of argumentation ethics, but applied generally to every single aspect of society instead of just property. Now, the problem with argumentation ethics, and it's something that, well, there's many, but the main issue with it is that in the context of libertarianism, it portrays ethical concepts as ideological constructs because it represents norms of behavior and laws established by a society's polis as being interchangeable. So, in other words, they describe society's relationship with the state in exactly the same way that the Socratic method portrays it. And they attempt to make norms ideological by extension because, from their perspective, norms are defined by the organization that establishes a society's polis, and therefore all norms of behavior are the product of the state doing something or the state establishing something, although they can never actually identify what that is or explain then how the state came to be, for example. But
The way I've
it's not the point. All right, go ahead.
the way I've always heard it described is the reactionary cliche that culture is downstream from politics. Or no,
Yeah,
politics is downstream from culture, which is also why they place so much emphasis on the culture war, because they see the state acting in ways and defining certain cultural norms in their mind as being a result of people just not engaging in the correct cultural norms. Now, how that works, how is that not circular reasoning? I don't know. But again, we're dealing with ideologues here, not people who informed their beliefs on the basis of a rational understanding of themselves and their own relationship to their environment on a rational basis, but are instead dictated to it by their egos.
but yeah, the
Hmm.
problem, of course, and the key issue that Heretic and I, from a methodological perspective, keep highlighting is that this creates a disconnect between the Austrian method's claims and how an Austrian would portray concepts in economics and other sociological studies which would emerge based on action being performed in a social context, like property, for example. So, in order to base claims about the nature of action on action, each claim about a specific instance of behavior being performed has to be based on an observable series of actions and their effects on an environment and the context that they emerged out of in order to talk about them in such a way where they're not just self-referential abstract concepts. And that's the consequence of looking at if you look at the way Hoppians or any libertarians, quote unquote, who have been deluded into believing that libertarianism is a political ideology, if you look at the way they talk about property or moral concepts, they always use frameworks like the NAP to try to represent them. They always try to talk about them as though they're ideals or moral concepts that one has to apply to their belief system, rather than representations of how people actually behave in societies or in environments around them to sustain themselves.
In their mind, it's just a series of rules that need to be imposed, and the only reason that people don't already do so is typically a result of some sort of moral failing on their part.
Yeah, it's because Daddy is not home.
Oh god,
Yeah.
that was super creepy.
Yeah, seriously, and that they're running with that as well. Like, and the fact that there is not just one person, but that there's a like most of the country at the very least is okay with going along with that goes to show you the state of mind that people that are following the culture war are in at this point. That they hear you have to kill the child. Daddy is home and he's gonna beat you for being bad and causing the state to fail. That people hear that and aren't fucking recoiled.
Yeah, Toriyama, what it is they de-individuated themselves and they have associated their sense of self with an archetype that requires them to be hostile towards other individuals or other people that are of their perceived archetypes.
And then there's the reaction to Elon Musk doing the Nazi slash Roman salute. The gaslighting that emerged as a response to that, I think, is probably just the best example so far that I could point to that all of this is just a product of motivated gaslighting.
Makes
You
sense.
cannot tell me that that was not a fucking Roman slash Nazi salute.
And the fact that he did it right after informs me that it was done deliberately. Whether or not he was,
Yeah.
what his intentions were, I mean, we can speculate that all day, and quite frankly, I don't care.
Well, the U.S. government is currently trying to posture its infrastructure project as a reconstruction of the Roman Empire, and now they're doing a Roman salute.
Excuse
The
me.
people that are architects of the entire project.
Yeah, it sounds about right. The empire never died; it just simply changed its form.
Because Elon Musk is another character that has quite a few deep financial ties to Peter Thiel, and if you've looked at some of the public appearances that Elon Musk has made in Chinese state media, well, the way he talks about Twitter over there is radically different than the way he tries to market it to American audiences. And anybody who's curious about that should really look that up. It was documented on a channel called Lao Y86. Great channel for documenting stuff that goes on in China that usually goes unreported because of the government. But he did a video talking about Elon Musk advertising Twitter and describing to a Chinese audience in 2020 an intention to fuse Twitter and PayPal into, quote, the American version of WeChat.
But just,
I
that,
can believe
sounds,
that.
that sounds wonderful, right? Having the functionality of Twitter, Facebook, and what's it called, PayPal, in a single
PayPal.
application that you have to have in order to be eligible to get a job in the white market. All of which is completely controlled by how well you perform on your social credit score. Doesn't that sound wonderful?
And
hold
since
on.
Elon Musk,
JC Armitage. I was just gonna say, JC Armitage says that didn't the ADL Anti-Defamation League say that Musk didn't do a Roman salute? I mean, yeah, but why do we care what they think? They're literally Israeli intelligence agency op or what have you.
I don't care.
Their organization was founded after a Jewish man raped a woman. The case was so blatantly obvious that it wasn't the black man that was being framed for it that even the KKK were just like, nah, you're full of it.
Find a fucking posture chart of the Roman salute and then compare it to what Elon Musk did, and then simply consider the context of him doing that with the US government's propaganda model and how it's trying to signal to people.
Well,
fuck the ADL, they're bad.
Yeah, and I just, oh my gosh, it is.
And that's why I said that they're full of it. It's the Anti-Defamation League. Like at that point, like you might as well just tell me that Stormfront has said that it wasn't the Roman salute.
Stormfront isn't a neo-Nazi movement.
Yeah, okay, calm
That's
down,
that's what
Hitler.
that's what this would be the equivalent
Dude,
of.
dude. Okay, I know this is gonna be this. I don't know. Okay, I think I've told it to you, gentlemen, in private, but this happened to me as soon as I saw Musk do the Roman salute. Guess what showed up on my YouTube feed?
What?
An AI translation of Hitler's speech, and it's just like,
Yeah,
why
and I've
is this
watched
shot on
that.
my feed? What now?
Yeah, and I've watched that. And what I was going to say, if you, what's really interesting about the psychological effect that the algorithms, as they're currently curating content to people, have, is that in Mein Kampf, anybody who's actually like taken the time to read Mein Kampf and understand what Hitler is actually talking about, he describes in great detail the strategic purpose of his rhetorical approach, his approach to rhetoric, which has been described as and has been categorized. I don't know if sense, but that style of rhetoric, it's called stochastic speaking, and it is known to have the psychological effect of, if someone is in a reactive state, then it causes them to be emotionally directed towards the speaker. And that's what Hitler describes in great detail in Mein Kampf, except he doesn't represent it from he doesn't talk about this in the context of like a modern framework of psychoanalysis. He describes the population of Germany as a result of the existing propaganda model, expressing their behavior in the feminine. Which what he means by that is the hermetic feminine, in the context of the principle of gender. So basically, they're in a perpetually reactive state, waiting to be directed. Is what that would translate to in a not in a de-abstracted context. But think about that contrasted with how people are being groomed by algorithms to constantly wait for signals and to have their left hemisphere shut off at all times and only be able to think in terms of archetypes and project those onto anything that they're interacting with and sensing.
So making sleeper cells in essence.
In a sense,
Well,
yeah.
they're brainwashing people to be into the exact state of mind that Hitler describes most of the population being in the 1920s, so that the Nazi style of propaganda can work. And they're starting to incorporate the exact same techniques into their propaganda model that the Nazis used. Which is really unsurprising if you followed the rabbit hole of the researchers that the U.S. government gained in Operation Paperclip and how they went on to be involved in the MK Ultra project.
I'm glad you brought that up because I was thinking the exact same thing. Uh, I've always told people this too that are not aware of MK Ultra. The MK Ultra is probably the most significant study about the human mind in human history.
Yeah,
And
everybody should probably go down that rabbit hole for themselves and don't just listen to somebody else talking about it. Actually read the documents and the related programs that were underneath it to understand what's being described.
yeah,
Because every single program, it's if it is documented and evidence of it wasn't destroyed, it's the methodology and the experiments are surprisingly well documented, and the reasoning behind everything is plainly laid out.
to me, and here's the thing: like the things that we do know about MK Ultra, that the reason as to why we know it in the first place is because of a FOIA, Freedom of Information Act. And it's just like they didn't release the full thing fully. They're having to release it over time because of the fact that the state can only hold on to information for so long. Not because they want to give it out, but because of the fact that they literally do not have the storage space to keep all those secrets at once. You know.
Yeah, and some of the fucking things that you learn going down that rabbit hole are wild. Like the connection between the CIA and the Church of Scientology, for example, and
Yeah.
how Scientology influenced some of the things that the CIA learned, and they sort of mutually influenced one another, the CIA and the Church of Scientology. Then there's how there's Project Non-Deus, which is a like 24, 25 page program documenting an experiment with a front group called the Monroe Institute, producing a repeatable method that uses binaural beats to induce astral projection. And they even describe how that works from a cognitive perspective. Like, I was not expecting to learn some of the things that I did when I went down the MK Ultra rabbit hole.
Yeah, Tama, I've experienced. I'm not gonna reveal my hand just yet about who I am or my past, but I've witnessed MK Ultra first person. It's just like, wow, the people that do this are absolutely vile pieces of crap.
People are gonna think you're a Fed now.
Well, anyways, to the point.
He's not.
I'm not, but to the point. What I'm trying to say is this: is that people that say that, oh, I would not fall for these tactics, I would not fall for these tricks. You would. You absolutely would, because
The amount of people the amount of people I've heard who have tried to say that they're not susceptible to propaganda, they are typically, it comes from a place of just pure ego, where they just project their own sense of stubbornness and their own self-confidence onto their ability to resist what they perceive to be propaganda. And their perception of propaganda basically comes down to, this is your opinion. Your opinion is this. They expect it to be blatantly, obviously in your face with a watermark at the bottom of every poster that says, brought to you by the Department of Propaganda.
Yeah, if you think that objective meaning exists, you are susceptible to propaganda simply because of that.
And another thing I'd like to add is this: is that propaganda is mostly told through subtext, and they will repeat it over and over again, but make you feel as though you came to that conclusion when in reality.
And that's exactly why the state keeps trying to put you into a reactive state. It's so you're never able to tell the difference between what you're perceiving and the existing narrative you already have.
To me, oh crap! My brain is blanking right now. I forgot what I was gonna say. Shoot. I'm trying to.
People are asking about the MK Ultra links. Just go to CIA.gov and look up Project Non-Deus, the one that I was referring to. It's called Project Non-Deus in reference to the cognitive mechanism that triggers the state of mind that allows for the astral projection effect to be possible, which the CIA refers to as hemisync.
Oh, darn it!
What were you gonna say?
I'm trying to remember what I was gonna say, but like, this is a little bit comical to say the least. Like, this is one of the moments where I had the thought in my head, just like, no, you're not gonna sit. Like, and mind you, it would not be anything inappropriate. It's just that literally, my mind cannot remember what I was gonna say. Literally, like less than a minute ago. It had something to do in relations to propaganda, and yes, actually yes. Now I remember. During the selectorial process, did you? And I can't be the only one that noticed. They were trying their damnedest, doing their absolute damnedest to get people invested in the political process.
Oh yeah.
Saying this, like,
Yeah.
saying, and it's just like that is just the most mask off. Like that is the most mask off in terms of propaganda I've seen them do so in a very long time.
And they've
Uh,
been going fucking all out on their methods to try to co-opt libertarianism, specifically in the last year. Which the only
yeah,
effect that it's really had, other than making the existing Hoppians more fanatical, is it's just exposed which people on Twitter were feds. Like, I'm
and
pretty
that's
sure I'm
exact.
pretty sure Sal the Agorist is a fed, for instance.
Well, there's going to be a
Just
I'm
lot of
willing to
because of
bet.
that is going to be a nuclear take. I mean, I agree with you, but I know that they're not going to take that
But
very well.
Yeah,
okay, well, just
exactly.
look at everything that Sal's posted in the last year. Then understand that agorists approach the study of action as though it derives from behavior that's observed, and therefore there needs to be behavior performed from the agorist perspective for you to be able to describe a concept like property, and therefore to observe property norms. So just based on the fact that agorists describe concepts like property this way, you could see that someone constantly simping for the notion that you can achieve libertarian ends with political means is not an agorist.
Oh,
Yep.
we should see. In
And
order to be able to achieve agorism, we need to have a state that just makes everything that's in the black market into the white market.
That narrative right there, you should compare it to how Karl Marx infiltrated the anarchist movements in the 19th century. That's basically the perennial propaganda argument that the state uses to demoralize dissident groups once they've been politicized. Oh, once they've accepted the notion that their means can be achieved through political ends. Oh, well, political ends voting and begging the state to do things differently, well, that's obviously going to accomplish the exact same thing as getting organized. So, really, why shouldn't we do that?
Well, you see, if we just get a little bit, if we just like, even just get an inch closer, isn't that just progress towards libertarianism?
And yeah, you're not getting closer. It's just a way of brainwashing you into being demoralized as a result of your own emotional investments. Because if you have the ability to maintain anything that you're presently invested in, then that's never going to drive you to revolution. And libertarianism, the libertarian ends that emerge as a result of people becoming free from political economies and homesteading their own property happens as a result of property titles being subverted in function. You do not achieve this by the state, you don't achieve this by voting. Either the state breaks down and people become self sufficient, through direct action as a consequence of that, to sort of compensate for its lack of existence, and then the consequence of that is that there's no longer a state in society, or people become self-sufficient as a way of enacting direct action against the state while it's trying to function, and that ends up causing it to implode internally because its infrastructure stops being functional. It's one of those two. That's how the state is going to end in such a way where a free society emerges.
And someone just
yep.
asks, Esso, you said it's called Project What Dayers? It's Project Non-Dayers.
Non-Deus.
Nondeus. You might want to write that out in the chat, by the way.
Yep, wrote that. Anybody who is curious and looking it up can go ahead and do so. The terminology that is used by the CIA, it's not academic nomenclature, but the method that's described can be repeated. In fact, the audio files that are used for Project Non-Deus are available on the internet, and if people, I actually have them on my computer. So if anybody wants a link to them, I can create like a mega link or something.
Oh, I have a
It,
mega
it's
link. I still have it.
oh
Nice.
well, I don't know if you could find that before the stream's over, so we could link it in chat. I'm sure everybody here would love to experiment with it.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Also, another
it's
thing I'd like
six
to
of
point
the
out.
eight. It's only 6 of the 8 audio files, but yeah, it's I
Another thing
think
I'd like to point. Go on.
it's just something I find quite interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Also,
I haven't messed around much with the method, but I can confirm that it does work. At least it achieves the hemi-sync effect.
You know, it's
Never
forced
also,
left
me
my
to experiment more with it, but it's been a while since I've touched it.
never experienced leaving my fucking body yet, but that's according to the experiment something that was documented and detailed in in the data conducting experiments based on people doing this are extensively featured throughout. And they even describe intent and success rates. And they tested things like people being in remote labs in Virginia being asked to read what's on a computer in California. I think was the distance. That was just one example.
yeah.
I've actually had extrasensory I've had extrasensory perception experiences before. This is
Likewise.
this is primarily
I,
while meditating, and no, I was not on substances. I was completely sober. But yeah, I've been able to like just perceive places that I'd never recognized before. I was still lucid, but it was just a very strange thing because I could vividly see things like a desk with a computer in front of me that I didn't recognize. Not in the sense that it was an alien computer, but just in the sense that like I was in someone else's bedroom looking through their eyes. I couldn't see what was on their computer, probably because that part of the brain that recognizes text was not perceiving it. But yeah, I was definitely perceiving things, and I was perceiving them quite vividly.
interesting. Fudge. Fudge.
But yeah,
But
one thing I actually
we
wanted to
want to get
bring
on.
up. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Uh,
One of the things that I wanted to bring up is just like all of this stuff about technology and how the algorithm or how these social media algorithms are designed specifically to brainwash you. It does sound daunting at first, and it is. Like that's a perfectly reasonable, in my opinion, perception to hold regarding things that have been happening the last few years. Like that's just it's rough out there, I think is what I'm trying to say. However, there is good news. You remember that thing you talked about, that new functionality that OpenAI included in their large language model?
Operator.
Yep, Operator, that's what it's
Yep.
called. Yeah, that's the reason why we wanted to bring that up earlier. We only touched upon it earlier, which is unfortunate because I think it's deserving of a lot more attention. What Operator does when you interface with it, or so my expectations are. I haven't actually experimented with it because currently it's closed source, despite the fact that the company is called OpenAI. Is yeah, you just tell it what you want. You can just bypass those algorithms entirely. What cognitive biases are going to exist are going to be dependent exclusively on the biases that are already trained into the model, which once that goes open source, are people able to screw around with the weights of the algorithms and the training data, be able to create their own, well, you're going to end up with significantly more variety in terms of what's available for average people. And basically, you have your own interface to the internet, and how much propaganda you expose yourself to could theoretically be entirely up to you, depending on your ability to alter the weights of what it selects for. But I can't imagine that there wouldn't at least be some demand for having a model that is directly hostile, or at least could be hostile just to pure government propaganda of any sort.
Gentlemen?
Program it with the. Yeah, what's up?
Gentlemen.
What's up?
Hello.
Hello, can you hear me?
Okay. Well, just what I was. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. What were you talking about a second ago, Heretic?
I was talking about Operator and its implications for being able to bypass the social media algorithms, basically completely cut out the middlemen in terms of your own access to the internet by substituting all of that,
Oh, yeah.
all of those shenanigans entirely with the AI that you could theoretically self-host.
My favorite.
Hold on.
Yeah, my favorite part about this whole fiasco is that blog that we linked in the chat and were mentioning earlier. To like, without even really getting into the contents of the blog, just two of the sections for that contain the sections of the essay of the article, the second and third sections that host paragraphs. The death of the middlemen, followed by who is telling me what to eat.
Yeah.
That's the mentality of the people that are responding to this, that are trying to simp for proprietary organizations.
Yep. Also, speaking of AI, do you guys want me? You guys want me to tell you the experiments that I've done with DeepSeek AI?
Yeah, sure.
So okay, I asked the AI, and I asked it a series of different questions, such as like, do psychotic symptoms flare up at night, or how to end world hunger from the perspective of someone like Donald Trump. And for the Donald Trump one, it actually tries to analyze and think of it from someone else's perspective. In this case, Trump. It actually makes an entire speech that actually captures his mannerisms. Like, I'm just gonna say it. Let me just do the
Can you read
quote.
it out?
Yes. Let me tell you, folks. We're going to do something about this. Hunger is a problem, but it's not an insurmountable one. Not when we have the strength, the ingenuity, and the determination of America behind us. I've seen greatness in this country, and I know we can lead the world to solve the issue once and for all. We're going to make America the food capital of the world, so big, so strong, so productive that we can feed not just ourselves, but everyone else too. We'll put our farmers back to work and give them the tools they need and open up new markets like never before. Trade deals will be signed and you're going to see American agriculture dominate like never before. We're going to use our technology, our innovation to create food solutions that are second to none. No more wasting good food because of bad policies or red tape. We'll streamline everything so that when we produce it, it gets where it needs to go fast and efficiently. And let me tell you, folks. Yes, this is a long quote. And let me tell you, folks. The rest of the world is going to be so grateful for what America does. They're not going to forget who helped them when they were in trouble. That's how it works. America first, but also America helping the world become a better place. We'll partner with a private industry because that's where the real magic happens. Government can't do everything, and I know that. But together we'll create jobs here at home while making sure people around the globe have food that they need to survive and thrive. Ending hunger isn't just about giving out handouts. It's about building a future where people can feed themselves. That's how we create a lasting change, and trust me, nobody knows how to do that better than America. And done.
Yeah. I was just going to say, yeah, you didn't really need to read the whole thing, but I want to I want to have one of those speeches created that's Trump describing his solution for Arkham Asylum. It's him talking about what he's going to do about Arkham Asylum.
Oh no.
Okay, I'm gonna do that right now.
Oh.
I don't read it off right now, but
Donald Trump's solution.
send it to me.
Donald Trump preparing a solution for what did
Arkham.
what's he
Hey,
gonna, what's Donald Trump gonna do about the Spider-Man writers having a hate boner for the guy?
Oh my god.
and
You'd probably just sign an executive order.
add to specify the parameter, and Trump talks about Robin in such a way where it's implied that he's sexually attracted to him.
No, I'm not gonna do that. I am not gonna do that.
Fair
I mean,
enough.
at least not on stream. At least not on stream. I'm just gonna type down this Donald Trump's solution to Arkham Asylum, and now it's gonna take some time because I only have so much RAM on my computer for this to work. I should let you know now that you need a beefy computer to get this to work. At least to run natively. You need at least 32 gigs of RAM to get a good one at a semi decent space. A lot of storage space, so preferably a solid state drive. And last but not least, you need to have a good GPU, which, yeah.
Still don't know what the GPU is for.
Extra VRAM.
I mean, that's the only thing I can really think of.
But yeah,
But,
no, that is how the AI, according to whatchamacallit, how it thinks how Donald Trump would talk, which is just wow. And you can also ask it hypothetical questions such as like, who would win in a fight, Spartans or Aztec warriors? And it'll give you a detailed list of like Spartan warriors, and then it'll go to Aztec warriors, and then compare them as to where they differ and where they are similar to one another.
I mean, to me, it's pretty cut and dry. Spartans actually engaged in like actual freaking wars against both rebels and the Covenant for decades. Not to mention they have guns, kind of a game changer, and power armor.
Yeah,
So
yeah, that makes sense.
they're proficient in all sorts of weaponry, including Covenant weaponry and vehicles. So it's like
Also,
not even a fair
yeah,
fight.
it'd just be a curve style.
Hydrogen bomb versus coughing baby.
Yeah. Also, Esso, you just tagged me.
Yeah,
You
that's.
want me to read?
I wanted to move on to the next article about Peter Thiel and the influence of the neo-reactionary movement on the modern propaganda model. This
I
site,
take that.
it gives one a brief insight into the organizational aspect of it, because of course there's the way that coordinating all these plans actually works within the CIA, which is it's vaguely known about, but there's basically a task force known as the Political Action Group that works within JSOC. It's a collaboration between the CIA and the Department of Defense, so they basically work together directly. And you can look this up, the Political Action Group, and they explicitly create their purpose is to create the narratives that the US government signals through propaganda, and to strategize their psychological operations against both people that are claimed as citizens, and also against other governments and other populations.
Yeah.
And through the political and through the CIA. So, for instance, it would be the Political Action Group that's directing the decisions made by the CIA when the Department of Defense collaborates with Activision to write the script for Call of Duty games, for example.
Makes sense. Oh, by the way, that AI, the question about Donald Trump with the Arkham Asylum, it's doing it. It's actually thinking right now in real time. I'll tell you guys when it's finished. But do you want me to read article, Esso?
Yeah, I want to get onto this right now.
Right, right. Inside the new right, where Peter Thiel is placing his biggest bets.
This is
Yeah.
yeah, this is a Vanity Fair article that was written in 2022. Now, there's a reason why that in and of itself is interesting because of the fact that the article is fairly complimentary to the views of all of the people that are being portrayed here, which based on if you were following the culture war, um, if you were following that narrative, well, this contradicts that a little bit. Liberal media covering the neo-reactionary movement favorably.
I mean, given that it goes
But
into
yeah,
given that
continue.
it goes into detail about uh, Curtis Yarvin and some of the shenanigans that he believes and gets up to, and one of the things that Hoppians just despise the most is the origins and the metaphysics of their beliefs being exposed to sunlight. I can't say that you could call it favorable.
Well, I actually, yeah, I mean, first of all, they're not attacking any of the movements, but also how I became aware of this article is I remember neo-reactionaries sharing it around. Specifically, the podcast of the Lotus Eaters did an episode about it around the time that it came out, and they all were portraying it like their reaction to it was that they interpreted it as a favorable view of their perspective. And it wasn't just them. There were a lot of people like sharing it around at the time, saying, "Yeah, the liberal media gets it. Here's a nugget of truth shining through." Which it's funny how that always works. When one of these outlets is covering something that they have an investment in favorably, then suddenly it's a brief moment of them getting it, but whenever they're being criticized, it's the deep state liberal agenda.
Oh, by
Yep.
the way, I have the link here for the Hemisync
Yes,
tapes.
thank you. I did not want to
Nice.
just leave people in the dark about that after mentioning that. If you click on that link and you have headphones, make sure you're listening to them and make sure you're listening to the audio in stereo. These are coded in stereo, right?
Yes. And they are,
All
as
right.
described earlier, meant to be played in stereo. If you're just listening to it
Yeah.
through speakers, it's just not going to work.
Put on headphones, listen to these at full volume, then get comfortable somewhere and make sure that it's a dark room that doesn't have any noise. Because you're going to need as little interference with your brain sense organs as possible for this to work. But it does fucking work.
I can attest to
I
this
can
as
believe
well
that.
in my own experience. And yeah, you have the link, so you can experiment with yourself.
Anyway, let's get back to Vanity Fair.
You want me to read it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Alright. They're not MAGA, they're not QAnon. Curtis Yarvin and the rising right are crafting a different strain of conservative politics. Oh, I'm about to burp. This is bad time. No, it's not. It was Halloween in Orlando, and we had piled into a car to make a short trip from the Hilton to an after party down the road to wind up the first night of the latest edition of a gathering called the National Conservatism Conference. For at least many of the young people, the actual business of conference going seemed to be beside the point. I just heard at how we used to conduct politics back before life in America spun out of control. There were jokes, or maybe they were serious questions. Terribly sorry.
What the hell did
About
you
whether
eat?
one of the guys. I ate something a long time ago, and it's now coming out of me. About whether one of the guys tagging along with us was a Fed. Surreptitiously, I do not know how you say that word.
Surreptitious.
Surreptitiously made a few searches of the name he'd given me, and I was surprised when I couldn't find a single plausible hit. Though that could have been because he was a hyper secret crypto type. There were some of those floating around. Not that anyone cared. These were people who were used to guarding their words. Don't F me here, a dark haired woman named Amanda Milius. I. Why do they have to have these.
It's
Why do they have
French.
to have these sort of names? I know, exactly. Why? Why? Said to me, as she somewhat imperiously dealt with the guy at the door who was skeptical about letting a reporter into the party and say, "We're all in here sacrificing kids to Moloch. We're just the last normal people hanging out at the end of the world." I had met Milius outside the Hilton. When I asked her cigarette, and she began to chaperone me around, telling people who I might press pass that I was there to profile her as an up and coming female director who, she said, had attracted more Amazon streams than any woman ever with her first documentary. A counter narrative to about Russiagate. Annie, oh my god, what is up with these names? Leibovitz is still scheduling the photo shoot. She kept saying. In this
How
world,
about
almost
we? Sorry. How about we skip down to the paragraph that starts with this worldview, these worldviews.
this these worldviews run counter to the American narrative of the last century that economic growth and technological innovation are inevitably leading us toward a better future. It's a position that may become that has become quite quietly edgy and cool in new tech outposts like Miami and Austin, and in downtown Manhattan, where the new right-ish politics are in. Signifiers like a demure cross necklace have become markers and transgressive chic. No one is leading this movement, but it does have key figures. Want to keep going, or
Yeah, let's keep going. This is
what
where it
is
gets good.
Oh my gosh! What are these names?
Peter
Peter
Thiel.
Thiel, the
Literally who
billionaire
we're
who
talking about.
yeah the billionaire who helped fund NatCon and who had just given the conference's opening address. Thiel had also funded things like the edgelordy and post-left inflicted news people cinema film festival, which ended its week-long run of parties and screenings in Manhattan just a few days before NatCon began. He's long been a big donor to the Republican political candidates, but in recent years, Thiel has grown increasingly involved in the politics of this younger and weirder world, becoming something like a nefarious godfather or a genial rich uncle, depending on your perspective. Podcasters and art world figures now joke about their hope to get the so-called Thiel bucks. His most significant recent outlays have been to two young Senate candidates who are deeply enmeshed in this scene and influenced by its intellectual currents. Hillbilly Elegy author J.D. Vance, yes, that one, running for the Republican nomination in Ohio, and Blake Masters in Arizona.
Yeah, so to clarify, the person who is currently the vice president of the U.S. government emerged out of this scene. And was directly financed by Thiel, who is a front for the CIA, basically.
And considering Vance's character, there's something off about him.
Which one, Thiel or Vance?
Yes.
Well, I was talking with YouTube before the stream started about my experience watching this interview that Sean Hannity did with J.D. Vance. I wasn't paying like super close special attention to it, but from the times I could, it did catch my attention. I got this really, really icky feeling about him, and I explained why to you guys. just to repeat it here, it was because he seemed to have an understanding of the state and society and the two's relationship to each other that actually kind of signaled to me through the use of rhetoric and the terms that he used that is as sophisticated, if not more so, than our own understanding. That he understands that the state creates social norms and has tremendous influence over the environment in which people perceive their actions. He didn't use it in those terms, of course, but
by defining property titles.
Sorry?
By defining property titles.
Mm-hmm. And I got this feeling from him that he understands all of that. His approach to it all is just, and therefore we got to get the state to enforce property titles even harder. We got a property titler. Property titler. I'm trying to figure out the best way to articulate it, but yeah, we're not dealing with.
Well, he explicitly in this clip portrays the state as a tool to then go after demographics
dissidents.
of people. Yeah, enemies. And he does this with this understanding of the state.
Mm-hmm.
So, with this being the case, yeah, I kind of got the same off feeling about him before. And I'm not going to claim that there's anything intellectually behind this, but it was something about just the fucking look in his eyes. Like, he always, like, looked like there's something off about him. Like, even among other politicians, just gave off a dark vibe. But yeah, I mean, if you consider those two perspectives together, that's the worldview of a murderous psychopath.
Yeah, I'm glad I'm not the only one that felt that, because when I was forced to watch the inauguration, I could just tell, like, yeah, there's this gentleman, if I could even call him that, is... It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, to me, as to when he's going to do something that's nefarious, you know?
He's probably
Let's
already
call them
just
what
that we don't know about it yet.
Let's just refer to them in ways they'd refer to their own perspectives, but like how they approach the Marxian dialectic, just flipping the moral roles. Okay, you're gonna talk about mentally molesting children as a way of getting them to conform to the U.S. government's propaganda model, and you're going to talk about it in terms like you're describing an abusive parent beating them, then let's just call them child rape apologists, and then don't treat their perspective as though it is deserving of intellectual consideration because of the fact that it's designed to manipulate your psyche so that you come to conclusions that you don't realize are suggestions outside of your conscious perspective.
Question: are we talking about Democrats or Republicans? Not a serious question, by the way. It's not a serious question, by the way. I'm just asking that to demonstrate a point.
Yeah, there's belief systems that can't be rationally scrutinized within their own internal reasoning because of how they portray logic, or because of the implication of how they describe concepts in relation to one another within their narrative, create a logical construct that then makes it so they can't internally scrutinize their own reasoning because they don't have the ability anymore to tell the difference between an external and internal perception. So yeah, there are belief systems that you can accurately categorize as something like a cognitohazard. And that perspective needs to become more common in, like, server moderation, or at the very least, people need to be made aware of the fact that there are belief systems that are strategically designed to molest your psyche that people strategically take advantage of. And if you don't, like, want to cite J.D. Vance or Donald Trump as an example of it, well, there was a pretty horrific story on YouTube of exactly this phenomenon playing out that doesn't even have anything to do with any major political scenes in the U.S.
Anybody watching this familiar with the 8 Passengers controversy, that YouTube channel?
I am. Don't know if anyone who's in the audience right now is, though.
Hey, you
That,
want to go ahead and explain everything?
yeah. So, just to put it, so there was 8 Passengers was a YouTube channel, or rather, it was a family vlog that became a YouTube channel. The idea just simply being that, what's the name of the mom?
Ruby Frankie.
Yeah, thank you, Ruby Frankie. Just trying to get some YouTube money, showcasing like family shenanigans, that sort of stuff, usual crap. And when you look into the backstory, you come to realize that the only reason that she became a mom in the first place was because she was actively pressured into doing it by the Mormon Church through various social expectations that were foisted upon her as a result of her being in that environment. And in order to try to cope with that pressure and anxiety that she felt, she ended up joining a self-help cult, and I feel very comfortable characterizing it as a cult, by the way, called Connections, with the CH spelled with an X if you want to look it up. So ConnexTions, where its leader Jody Hildebrandt was actively engaging in dogmatic reasoning by appealing to the Socratic method, particularly what's it called, objectivism slash universalism, in order to help people quote unquote live in truth, or live without distortion, as she would characterize it. And the only reason that she would ever, and the way that she framed it is that the only reason you would ever disagree with her is because you were living in distortion, and part of that, and part of the way that you helped your kids not live out of distortion, which distortion is supposedly the origin for anyone experiencing any kind of anxiety, depression, or any kind of like malcontent towards their circumstances, is because they are living in distortion, is to essentially repent. What is it? Repent your sinful practices. I'm having trouble remembering how they characterized it within their own internal reasoning.
You would have to be honest, humble, and responsible.
And of course,
Which basically, yeah, in practice, those 3 things are interpreted unilaterally by Jody Hildebrandt. So in practice, it just means that being in truth means whatever the fuck Jody Hildebrandt says it means.
Yeah, pretty much. And it also,
yeah, it's a validation mechanism in psychology. It's also referencing the concept of truth, like the Socratic method, which is why I'm probably going to be referencing this story a lot in the future, because it serves as a Rosetta Stone that helps me illustrate that the Socratic method is a brainwashing tactic.
Excuse me.
Anyway, you want to continue, though?
with
The article, you mean?
Well, just you describing the story. Because, yeah, I mean, unless you wanted to continue, I could summarize.
well, yeah, you can sure. There's really not much to talk about other than eventually people caught on to. I mean, they caught on fairly quickly, actually, but as the mother, I'm blanking on her name again.
Ruby Frankie?
Yeah, as Ruby Frankie started gaining a lot more notoriety, people noticed discrepancies in her YouTube channel where it became increasingly obvious that she was just straight up abusing her kids, starving them, beating them, putting them into actual brainwashing camps. There was this one instance where she had a teenage son who was obviously unhappy with the way the family was going. So what happened is that in order to teach him the value of hard work and discipline and stuff like that, had him sent away onto one of those wilderness expedition camps where the kid is basically forced to live out in the wilderness on their own for like 2 weeks. And kids have died in camps like these, so she was actually putting her son in danger by doing this. But in an ironic slash not really that ironic twist, he actually came back stronger and healthier than ever before because he wasn't being abused by her anymore.
And then after she got involved with connections, which didn't happen until a few years into running the channel, then she started putting out videos advertising the connections practices. Those videos are just I'm amazed that they felt like those were good things to share. Things like if you're having mental problems, that's just something that you can rationally control. You have you were raped. Well, what did you do to get raped?
Oh.
Yes,
Literally,
actually,
I
that's a paraphrasing of something that was actually said.
yeah, that was an actual video. I'm not making that up.
I saw
I
it.
can believe it.
I saw it.
I
I
can
can
believe it.
confirm.
But yeah, that eventually led to them just like taking two of the kids and putting them in like a concentration camp. It is a pretty fucking dark. It ended in a pretty dark way, and that's kind of the point of bringing it up. Is it's like a 21st century horror story, and it's a pretty decent cautionary tale without even invoking any uh, politically signaling movements. Why exactly you need to be wary of mind control tactics, because they're starting to become more commonly known about, and people are, if you don't understand that meaning is not objective, people will use it against you and can get you to basically do anything they want you to do and make you think that it's you pursuing your own sense of desire.
Then just an observation. Notice how Child Protective Services didn't get involved.
Oh, they did actually. They're the ones.
Oh
that
well, I get.
it took them a long ass time, but yeah, eventually, like people were actually apparently calling in for Child Protective Services to get involved for like literally years, and submitting
And
clips from Jody Hilda or not Jody Hildebrandt. Well, yeah, actually Jody Hildebrandt, but primarily Ruby Frankie's own videos as evidence to at least look into it. But apparently, because they were living in Utah, the Mormon Church has just a truly crazy amount of influence in the political economy of Utah, such that the Child Protective Services, which is state run, and by state I don't mean the government, I mean like the state of Utah, basically they had to look the other way. Not that they would have helped them anyway, but just should give you the idea of just if you're in a Mormon family in Utah and you're being abused, your only real means of escaping besides attempting to go through the state and cross your fingers that you don't end up in child sex trafficking rings is to basically just run.
yeah, basically.
And I mean, thankfully, in the case of what happened there's like a Ruby Frankie kept a journal documenting everything that was happening in that last case that they actually finally got like the prison time for. And if you want a good psychoanalysis of that mentality and what people are thinking when they're like that leads them to behave that way, it's a pretty good resource because it doesn't just describe like what's happening, but it portrays her perspective pretty clearly. And but I'll just give everybody a warning in advance. It reads like something that you'd pick up and you'd find on the ground and pick up while you're playing Outlast. Like it
That's
is,
a name I haven't heard in a long time.
it is unhinged.
I haven't read it, so I can't say, but given the kind of mental gymnastics one would need to do to justify these actions within their own internal reasoning, yeah, I would say that their own narrative that they would create to themselves would very likely just be completely insane to anyone who is, not them.
Well, Even more, even a step beyond that, and why I even bring this up is because I'd like you to compare, if you're going to go down that rabbit hole and actually look into this stuff, I'd like you to then compare the psychological tactics that are being presented in the way that these two people conduct themselves to the neo-reactionary belief system and the US government's propaganda model. Yeah, it's basically, if you want a view of the logical conclusion of this reasoning in an entirely non-political context, just look there. But anyway, can we get back to the Vanity Fair article?
Sure. I'll read the last paragraph. Oh, wait, I'll keep reading. Thiel has given more than... What now?
Yeah, there we are.
Thiel has given more than $10 million to super PACs supporting the men's candidates. Both are personally close to him. Vance is a former employee of Thiel's Mithril Capital, and Masters, until recently, the COO of the Thiel's so-called family office, also ran the Thiel Foundation, which has become increasingly intertwined with the new right ecosystem. These three, Thiel, Vance, Masters, are all friends with Curtis Yarvin, a 48-year-old ex-programmer and blogger who has done more than anyone to articulate the world historical critique and popularize the key terms of the new right. You often hear the people in this world, again under many layers of irony, call him things like Lord Yarvin or our prophet. I was looking around the party for Vance, who hadn't arrived yet, when Milius nudged me and pointed me to a table off to our left. Why is it that whenever I see Curtis, he's surrounded by a big table of incels? She asked, with an apparent fondness. I spotted Yarvin, a slight bespectacled man with long dark hair, drinking a glass of wine with a crowd that included Josh Hammer, the national conservatism-minded young opinion editor of Newsweek, and Michael Ann, a Machiavelli scholar and former spokesman for Trump's National Security Council, and a prominent public intellectualizer of the Trump movement. Other luminaries afoot for the conference included Dignity author Chris Arnott, and who seemed slightly unsure about the whole NatCon thing, and Sohrab Ahmadi. I am not going to try and... I butchered that. I'm not going to fix it. Deal with it. The former opinion of the editor of the New York Post and a new co-founder, now a co-founder and editor at the new magazine Compact, whose vision is, according to its mission statement, shaped by our desire for a strong social democratic state that defends community, local and national, familial and religious, against a libertine left and libertarian right. It is a very of the moment project. Want to keep going, or do you guys want to make any comments here?
Keep going. At least I don't have anything to add.
Political reporters, at least... Political reporters, at least the ones who have bothered to write about Yarvin, have often dismissed him as a look with a readership made up mostly of lonely internet weirdos, fascists, or both. But to ignore him is to underestimate how Yarvin's ideas, or at least ideas in conversation with his, have become foundational to a whole political and cultural scene that goes much deeper than anything you'd learn from the panel speeches at an event like NatCon, or how those ideas are going to shape the future of the American right. Whether or not Vance and Masters win the Senate primaries, I introduced myself, and soon Milius and I were outside smoking as Yarvin and I chatted about whether he'd be willing to talk to me on the record. I need to get a drink of water. Give me a moment.
Alright. I'll just read. People often struggle with what to make of Thiel's involvement in this ecosystem. It's because it's deliberately obfuscated. Last year, the journalist Max Kafkin published a biography of Thiel titled The Contrarian, in which he described Yarvin as the house political philosopher for a network often called the Thielverse. The book focuses heavily on Thiel's political maneuverings, describing how he evolved from being a hyper-libertarian to someone who now makes common cause with nationalists and populists, and explains how Thiel helped both Cruz and Josh Hawley on their paths to the Senate. The Contrarian ends with a dark picture of the billionaire trying to extend his political reach ever more overtly by funding and shepherding the campaigns of Masters and Vance. Masters and Vance are different from Hawley and Cruz, Kafkin writes. The former two are extensions of Thiel. But, I guess that gets, just to the point that this article is really illustrating, if anybody wants to read more of it, because we don't have to continue if, anyone else here doesn't want to, because it's really just laying out a web of more group connections. But that's the core idea, is that Peter Thiel and Curtis Yarvin are deeply connected in terms of spreading the culture war narrative, and have been instrumental because of Thiel's organizations and his involvement with the CIA in directly incorporating the U.S. government's propaganda model into the design of proprietary platforms through the financial manipulation that being involved in firms like PayPal gives both his organization and the CIA as leverage. And the U.S. government even directly used this mechanism back in the early 2010s for, God, what was that one program run by, like, when Obama was president, where PayPal was being used to identify people engaging in certain kinds of business that the government was categorizing
Was that
people
Prism?
on watch list? No, it was God, I want to say Operation Blowback, but that's not. I know that's not right.
Oh,
It had a
it's
name
on-
like that.
It's on the tip of my tongue.
Choke Point, Operation
Yes, that's it.
Choke Point. That was the name of it.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, the U.S. government's even openly strategized in such a way that we're describing before. In the case of Operation Choke Point, just for example, or the fact that the U.S. government can simply unilaterally freeze someone's assets or stop enforcing property titles. But I suppose we can wrap up here unless there's anything else that you guys wanted to bring up. Or let's look at the chat, see if anybody wants to ask us any questions in the chat.
The reactionary guys absolutely flipped when they started being called woke right.
I know
Well,
that
it's-
too.
That's a literally accurate description of their movement from an intellectual perspective, because of the fact that the neo-reactionary framework, as Curtis Yarvin explicitly describes, is lifted from Hans Hermann Hoppe, and I'll link both in the chat and a blog that he wrote describing this, like how Hoppe's work changed his perspective even. He details it explicitly. And how this also is exactly how people who've been politicized through the framework of intersectional ideology frame society's relationship to the state. It's just that Hoppians portray the opposite moral perspective as being the virtuous one. It's lifted directly from universal pragmatics, which is one of the main concepts in critical theory that schools of thought based on critical theory cite in order to justify their claims about how these biases supposedly originate from like a foundation like class.
I'm reminded of, yeah, like I remember picking up on this a while back about how a lot of the concepts described in Hoppianism essentially are lifted directly from Marxism. They just take the concept of, oh, what's it called? They just take the concept of the class warfare and reverse the moral roles.
Why is it not bigoted to describe these perspectives directed at quote-unquote illegal immigrants? Oh, well, you see, you have to consider the historical/cultural context. Why can't a white person call a black person racist? Well, you have to consider the historical and cultural context. Same argument.
Yeah. Oh my god, those days were just. Yeah, I remember just. Even back then, I just thought, dude, I'm talking to a brick wall here, aren't I?
Oh, yeah. Well, you're not if you're talking to something even more unyielding than a brick wall. You're talking to someone's ego.
Yeah, and he's just like,
That's the one thing that makes neo-reactionaries screech if anybody wants them to. Just cite the intellectual foundations, just cite the methodologies, the concepts that they're introducing to the discussion, identify them, and then try to get them to argue within the internal reasoning of their methodology. That's the reason why they try so hard to portray their perspective in such a way where it doesn't appear controversial, is because they're using language to obfuscate the fact that it's an ideology. Well, really, in Hoppe's case, he would portray his perspective as though it conceptually undermines the need for a standard of demarcation for making claims about action. All right, buddy. My claims can't be scientifically scrutinized, but you're supposed to take them seriously intellectually.
yeah. I mean, there's a reason that's why I don't take most of these people seriously in the first place. Simply because of the aforementioned reasons, and that the fact is just like, I have better things to do with my time. I was just gonna say, you have 15 seconds to grab my attention, or else I'm just gonna go play video games, because playing video games is a much better usage of my time than anything else,
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say that, but another thing that I'll point out about Hoppe is you'll notice that whenever he does public speeches compared to any other speaker in the libertarian conservative scene, he by far is has the most curated presentations. He doesn't take audience questions unless they're specifically chosen by him, doesn't do interviews unless they're written and they're, of course, with people who are basically going to ask pre-approved questions. And with the people that he does discuss his ideas with, they basically fluff up his perspective and kiss his ass the entire time. It reminds me very, very much of those interviews that Billy Mitchell tried to do when he was trying to convince people that he wasn't cheating.
I'm not familiar with those.
I don't know why that's the example that came to mind, but if anybody wants to see that, they can look it up on YouTube. Yeah, he in his style of presentation and just the fact that he never actually has ad-lib conversations with people, it causes you to realize that his ideas have never actually faced serious scrutiny.
Oh no, they have.
Or
It's just that he
very
refuses
little.
to allow them to be addressed.
Yeah, whenever he actually addresses quote-unquote criticism, they are always straw man arguments. but more commonly, what he does is it's an archetype out of the arguments that are presented against his perspective, and then he conflates multiple different competing and conflicting claims against his perspective as though they're interchangeable with one another, points out the contradictions, and then acts as though that's a conceptual problem with the criticism against him. You see these competing perspectives that are all described by mutually exclusive people that all emerge from different worldviews. They're all the same argument, so look at the fact they contradict each other. Look how incoherent that is.
Yeah.
You disagree.
Anyways.
You disagree with my characterization of Marxian communism. Well, I disagree with my characterization of Marxian communism too. Therefore, you and I agree on absolutely everything, and you're a Hoppian.
You
Well-
have to refer to the context of my original essay. It's basically the Hoppian way of saying you need the objective perspective. You're just espousing the subjective perspective. On its face, that's a reasonable take. You know, you need to cite the statement in its original context, but in practice, it's used by Hoppians to gaslight criticism that they can't address. And Heretic and I have been dealing with that for years. But we don't even really need to point to all of our examples because they'll just continue to gaslight us. So let's just point out the fact that they view gaslighting as an ideological tactic that's a form of will to power being expressed in action.
And it's not just the whole point of bringing this up in the first place is just to highlight that this is not the only way that this is going to manifest. And it's certainly not going to be the only way, or the only example of brainwashing techniques that you're going to be encountering not only now, but into the future as the state becomes more and more desperate to hold on to its organizational model. The propaganda is going to become a lot more overt, but it's also simultaneously going to be a lot more covert as well. Since one thing I've noticed in particular is that, well, you can see this a lot just by talking to individuals who identify with conservative archetypes, where they're overwhelmed with this feeling of hope. Fox News in particular is just blasting all of these things that Trump is doing, all these actions that he's performing, and constantly characterizing them as great, wonderful, historical achievements. I can't help but notice the frequent use of the motif achievement to describe him doing things that those same people were critical of others doing. Like him signing like hundreds and hundreds of executive orders, basically legislating through executive order, was something that they criticized Barack Obama for doing in his years.
The editorializing in state media and how the recent behaviors of the U.S. government is covered, or just how everything around Trump is covered. It especially in state media that's directed towards people that are following the culture war narrative, it very strongly resembles like North Korean propaganda at this point. In the way that the phrasing in the editorializing is always like hyperbolic, bombastic. It's always grandiose, and it's portraying everything as though there's progress marching towards some inevitable goal. You know, Donald Trump achieving a great how would they phrase that? Making a great achievement that's equivalent to the American Revolution. I think that that's literally how the presidency of Trump's second presidency was advertised after the election. That phrase. This is going to be the most transformative presidency since the revolution. That in particular very strongly reminded me of North Korean propaganda because of how everything's about the revolution. But I mean, that's not even the only comparison. There's the strongman archetype. There's just the clownish way in which anything even remotely critical of Donald Trump and the government gets covered in state media. Like, have you seen that bishop that spoke at, I think it was, if not his inauguration, then some more recent event that Trump and a couple of the major figures in the government were attending? And all this bishop did was basically just like,
Smack talk.
no, call like, really, you should look this up, and I wish I wasn't blanking on her name at the moment. Dark Matter 2525's most recent upload, Christians who hate Christianity, was covering this in great detail, but basically it was just somebody pointing out the Christian perspective on, well, immigration, or the way that it was being framed, how someone should treat strangers, and them in response saying, let's, not dehumanize people, and let's also not categorize them as enemies. Didn't even say anything particularly disparaging about Donald Trump or culture war, or the culture war narrative. The way that this has been covered in state media, especially those outlets directed towards the people following the culture war, has been to accuse her of being a lesbian, has been to say to portray that as a woke fake Christian taking an opportunity to attack Trump, going on a tirade. That again reminds me of the way that a Soviet regime would describe something counter-revolutionary
Yeah.
in its news, quote unquote.
Anyways, I'm getting a little tired, gentlemen.
Yeah, we should probably start wrapping this
Wrap
up.
it up.
I just wanted to highlight this to bring up just the idea that people who have been, or people who identify with certain political archetypes, have been exposed to literal decades of propaganda designed specifically to denigrate and demoralize them. And as such, that has made them psychologically and emotionally susceptible to an emotional, or to propaganda narrative that's designed to appeal to an emotional state that's as powerful, if not more powerful, than fear, which is hope. In this case, all they've done is just created this idea that, oh, hey, look, don't worry, things are getting better now. Things are totally different. No, same shit, different, same shit, different bull. That's...
Which I'll tell you, I was a little bit concerned about the dehumanizing genocidal rhetoric that the U.S. government was posturing before January 20th. But seeing what's happened since, it's very clear to me that the U.S. government falsely estimates the security of its own organization model because of the fact that the way they're coordinating resources indicates that they believe they will be able to invest in the new infrastructure program. They think that people aren't going to have alternatives, which is why they believe that inducing artificial costs through enforcing property titles, or by adding them through proprietary financial institutions, or just platforms like PayPal, for instance, is actually going to steer people towards participation in the political economy. The internal reasoning behind that assumes that there's no alternative, and that would actually work as a pressure to recontextualize the way that they inform their own sense of desire. They clearly don't understand or haven't caught on yet to the fact that it is actually possible for people to coordinate against them. More than likely, what they believe is that their propaganda model is just going to obfuscate any attempts at opposition against them. Well, fucking boy, were they wrong about that one.
They're in for a rude. They're going to be in for a rude awakening, and you don't even have to like listen to us. Like, just about every other week, we're discovering some alternative, some other project that we didn't even know about that is either has tremendous implications for what it is that we seek to do with Project Fork the Internet, or has some other tremendous effect with very wide-reaching implications that either its developers aren't aware of, or was developed with similar goals to ours in mind. So
Literally,
to say that there
if
aren't alternatives is going to be ridiculous, and at least in my mind, it comes off as ridiculous because I see all of these alternatives, and I'm just thinking to myself, why on earth would I have to be concerned about a Skynet scenario when Skynet's already been defeated?
become. Go ahead.
I was just going to say Skynet was defeated the moment large language models became open source.
Yep.
And all I was going to say is you can extend this beyond AIs because of the fact that, we're not the only ones, but we've produced probably the best method, at least I would argue, and that I have come across for achieving economic self-sufficiency. It's one where you can operate in net gains, and you are absolutely not dependent in any financial sense on legal vendors. So the fact that that's technically possible now really just means that if you actually want to respond to the state in such a way where you're making a power move against them, just become economically self-sufficient. Create a post-political economic network, what we've been calling, you and your friends, or really any social network that you desire to create in the process of setting it up. Just become self-sufficient, and then start making copies of everything that you use to become self-sufficient with and start sharing it. Make everyone self-sufficient, then the government doesn't have leverage to act.
Yeah.
After all, why not? Why
Yeah.
shouldn't you become self-sufficient?
Now that you can. Because the only reason that you couldn't before is because, well, nobody had apparently put together a method like this, and it's understandable why, because it required discovering a few things. And on top of that, it's not something that, based on the government's organization model, they can even do it. They can even do anything about. Like after you're self-sufficient, there is no way that they could financially exert leverage over you. The only thing that's left is violence, and then when they get to that point, there's already a population of self-sufficient people, at least around you. So that's not going to be something that's very easy, at least. And even then, all that the government can do is there's nothing they can do to get benefit out of that situation. Like, all they would be doing is just try to destroy things and purge people. So they're not gaining resources, they're just galvanizing more people against them and destroying things that they, are supposed to be trying to manage.
Very poor managers are the ones that destroy their own stuff.
Yeah, it's the state is in a situation where there's absolutely no possibility of them getting past the technical problems that their organization model presently faces. So I would say pretty soundly that we're on the path to the good timeline, so to speak, but a lot of shit can go wrong between now and then still.
Even in the best case scenario, things are still going to be very rough. But anyways, I think that's all we've got for tonight. It's a bit short stream, but
Yeah.
Yeah, we kind of started a bit late. Anyways,
Yeah.
thank you for stopping by and thank you for joining us today.
Yeet.
Yeah, and we'll see you next time.